Hello everyone, this is Andrew and welcome to the first and last update of my island aquarium. Last month I decided to upgrade my 10-year-old dirt-planted goldfish tank that had pretty much run out of dirt and had been overrun with a very stubborn type of algae that had glued itself to all of my plants over the last few years. Instead of taking everything out and starting from scratch, I decided to add in new layers of dirt, Eco-Complete, and Flaval stratum in the middle back section where the Amazon swords would go, and then cover the entire surface with a layer of pool filter sand. So I cleaned up all the plants and hit them with some hydrogen peroxide to hopefully eliminate the unwanted algae. I replanted the Amazon swords and added some new ones. Everything seemed to be going great until the day after planting, I discovered something very unexpected. The worms that had lived down in this aquarium's dirt layer for the last 10 years were sticking up out of the sand and waving. It was kind of cool, and I figured it shouldn't be a problem. Once the goldfish were back in the tank, they would happily gobble them up. But over the next few days, I discovered more of the worms sticking up and waving around the newly planted Amazon swords. But here, they were somehow pulling up the dirt all the way through the Flaval stratum and sand layer, and that's not good. The next issue is also very unexpected. So I now know that when you add a layer of pool filter sand on top of gravel with hair algae, the sand will kill the algae, no surprise there, but once the algae dies, the pool filter sand does what its name implies. It filters. Over time, the dead algae will actually filter up through the sand and end up sitting in clumps on the surface. It did look kind of cool and natural at first, and it didn't seem like it would be that big of a problem. But then it happened. Despite all my efforts, the persistent hair algae that none of my snails or goldfish would eat started growing on all of my newly planted plants. And you can't just pull this stuff up like normal hair algae. It glues itself to the leaves and eventually chokes them off completely. So I made the decision to get some Amano shrimp, which are supposed to be excellent algae eaters, and see if they would actually eat this type of algae for me. Now, you can't keep shrimp with full-size goldfish, obviously, but I figured I could keep the shrimp in one of my other tanks after they had cleaned things up. I had an extra 30-gallon tank, so it was no problem, and I would get to have my very first shrimp tank. Yay! But before I could put these plans into action, I got hit by what would be the last straw for me. It was seeing the by now well-established algae rapidly spreading on my sponge pre-filters. I had added these to the intakes of my hang-on back filters to make sure none of the sand would get into the impellers. To be honest, I really kind of liked the look of algae, and it was never a problem for the first 8 years having this tank, but this new type was something very different. So I bid farewell to my new and old plants, completely cleaned and dried up the tank, and gave everything a good hydrogen peroxide soaking. All the sponges and driftwood got boiled. I was going to make sure the next time this tank would stay completely isolated from the other tanks. So even if the dreaded algae eventually does find its way back into the tank, the plants and shrimps will already be well established and better able to deal with it. Now, I have a new plan for this tank that I'm pretty excited about, but that's for another video. Sorry if this was a bit of a bummer update, but I'm making these videos to document all the things going on with my fish tanks, and obviously not everything goes according to plan. So that's the story of how my island aquarium came to a very unexpected and extremely disappointing ending. But on the brighter side, it did end up giving me the motivation I needed to set up what will be my very first shrimp tank. Thanks for watching. I am Andrew, and as always, happy fish keeping.